Bobby, thank you so much for joining us today. It's awesome to have a time to
Pleasure.
chat. So we're here today to talk about the fantastic Hadrian's Wall, which I've been almost non-stop playing for the last week since I got it. And before I ask a few questions about this and you and the development of it, I have to just say this is a fantastic game. I was blown away by it, and
Thanks.
I can't really quite fathom how much fun I'm having when I consider the actual logistics of the fact that it's 2 pieces of paper. It's just incredible what you've done. But before we come into that, I'm interested in your personal background in playing games, because I understand this is where you first met Shem, right? At his, well, not his, but at a local board game meetup. Is that right?
Yeah, it's so I live on the Kapti Coast, which is about 45 minutes north of Wellington, which is at the south tip of the North Island. And moved up here. Didn't know anyone up here. I play board games, role-playing games. Since having my son Max, the role-playing is kind of moved back a bit, because it's, having that regular session gets a bit difficult when you have kids, and so moving into board games a lot more. And I work in the city, so I travel backwards and forwards on the train. And what I was doing was I was actually screenwriting, and I got a bit stuck. So I thought I needed to kind of put that to aside, and just after like 4 or 5 years of just solid writing, and I thought, well, I need some way of actually expressing get the creativity out. So I thought I've got an idea for a board game, and I'll start working on it. And then that was about the same time that I was looking for board game groups up here, and so it's just so happened. The first couple of sessions, I don't think we even mentioned the fact that about game design. It was just a collection of fellas getting together to play games, and it and then it just came up, and sometimes Shem would bring his games along for us to play to. So we got the first iterations of some of the stuff that you've got on your shelves now. So but there's also so we became friends through that, and then so there's a good collection of us up here, and that we play games at least once, twice a week. And yeah, so I'm pretty lucky, because most times we're playing something new on the table. So you're constantly learning new rules, but you're getting a very good idea of what you like and what you don't like, and you see what things work and what you don't work. I think they do say that you develop taste before you develop any kind of skill in doing anything, and I think that applies to board games as well.
Absolutely. So what sort of games at this point were you enjoying? What are the games that you personally have fun playing?
The games I have fun playing, there's certain games I'm not a big fan of, and it's not the fact that they're not good games, it's just they're not my personal taste. So it's pretty easy just to go the ones I don't like, which is like Dudes on a Map. So I'm not really a big fan of Dudes on the Map and like 4X games, area control, and I quite like the engine building, and I guess Hadrian's Wall is an example of that. I like storytelling. I've been a big role player for the last 30 odd years, so the storytelling aspect, and and the engine building, the thing at the end of the game where you can go, I've made this, which is great. Yeah. So yeah, Lords of Waterdeep, Underwater Cities, those are some of the ones that I get to the table.
Okay, so having played a few games, been involved in role play for a long time, having the sort of brain that you do, it seems like you're always thinking about how these things are made up. What was the spark for Hadrian's Wall? How did it come about?
It came about, I can't remember what we were playing. I think it could be, I think it could have been Paladins. We were playing an early version of Paladins. We're part of a collective in New Zealand called the Game Artisans of New Zealand. So there's a group of designers across the country, and we have like local areas, and we have a Wellington area. We get together every 6 to 8 weeks to test each other's prototypes out. And I just I just had a failure on. I tried to kickstart one of my games, and for huge amounts of reasons, it didn't work. So I was a bit gutted about that. But I was testing. We were testing something else out, and you know, in Paladins, you've got that mechanic with the wall building.
Mhm.
And I think someone mentioned about building walls as being a mechanic. I was like, you know, being from England, I was like, you heard about Hadrian's Wall? And no one had heard about it. So I was like, so I told them about it, and then I was like, next thing was like, has anybody made a game of Hadrian's Wall? So I looked it up. There was only one I could find, and it was released some time ago. And I was thinking, well, that's ideal. It just was born out of that, and I've been playing a lot of roll and writes at that point as well, and it just seemed a natural, you know, progression to actually go, well, if it's going to be a wall building, then it would suit that kind of you know, I literally wrote, you know, scratching it in. So Fleet was like one of my favorites, and I played Fleet the dice game. And that, I mean, that was probably one of the biggest, I suppose, stepping stones for me. Having those two sheets. I mean, you can see quite a lot of similarities in some ways. Those two sheets and the ability to go from one to the other and then back again. And I just loved that. I just loved that mechanic. So that was a big inspiration for me.
Having considered that, okay, I'm enjoying roll and writes right now. Hadrian's Wall as a concept hasn't taken off in board game worlds yet. That to me is 1 + 1, but what you've ended with is 1,000. So I'm interested how it went from there to there, and specifically what I mean is, in Hadrian's Wall, you're not just building a wall. You are developing a community. You're building buildings. There's like a whole thing going on. How did you? I guess the question is, how did you decide to make it so complex in terms of the choices? Because it feels kind of like there's a board and you're playing a worker placement as well as doing an engine building as well as a roll right. It feels like there's so much going on.
So I suppose from the worker placement side of things, I guess that comes from the components. And what I found is there was a few games. I think there's a Dice Settlers. There's a game called Dice Settlers, which in fact, Shem brought it around one time when we were playing it, and we quite enjoyed it. But we found that what we were doing was we were getting lost, because the fact is we needed some kind of physical component to actually move around the board. So it was always my intention to have that physical, and I can't hold that much in my head, you know, and the ability to be able to pick things up and go, I'm going to do something with that. It means that I suppose the decision making is not how many have I got with your fingers. It's like, where do I put that? And so the fun part, not the you know, remembering. It's not a remembering game. For me, I kind of, as I've got older, I'm slowly turning into my father. Whereas I don't know, you know, you go to the museums, and you know, you want to go around when you were younger and press all the buttons while your dad's like reading every single panel, but really interested. And that's what I found as I got older that I started to do. I was going, I want to find more about this, and that's what I've done is literally was like, right, I need to immerse myself in this you know, this era. So I got a few books, and I read through them, made notes, watched a few videos, just really got a good sense of what Hadrian's Wall was all about, who the kind of people that were working there, the kind of things that would, you know, that you would find that those things. I mean, although Hadrian's Wall is played over 6 years, 6 rounds, that stood up for like nearly 300 years. So, and that became you know, it kind of at some point ceased to become an outpost and became like more like a trading post. And so it was just like, okay, right, so let me pull out all the parts that are interesting, and then see if I can apply a mechanic to it. And that literally was what I think the first draft is pretty much 75% of what you see in the game right now. Like any design that I've done, I think any designs that most people do, the first couple of attempts were heinous. I got completely lost on the sheets of paper. I didn't know where I was, and it became very apparent that if this was going to work, the layout would need to be spot on. And so it was just moving that around and making sure that worked. There were at the start, you know, in some ways copying Fleet a bit, but also the designers, including Shem and Sam, take the mickey out of me because I always go to dice. I've got to stop doing that. And I suppose that's the role playing aspect of me. I always go, I love dice. I love the tactility of dice. And so at the beginning, your resources were controlled by dice. But as the progression was made, that was moved away. But it was just read the books, find out the information, see what's interesting, see what works.
Interesting. That's fascinating to me that somebody like you, who's got such a passion and history in role-playing game, and obviously a love of dice from that, has created what, in my opinion, is a best-in-class rolling, right? That doesn't include any rolling. There are no dice.
It came down. I suppose that it's the next. It's when. I play test Shem's games, so I've seen the progression of all of the West Kingdom stuff. As they're being play tested, and I play test my efforts with him. And I went around to his house and said, can you play test with him? I want to try this out with 2 players. I had no preconceptions that he would want to publish it, but he went through even the rough. It's 5-6 months down the line, and he went, I published this after the first play, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's amazing!" So, but then he said, "This is great," and I was like, "Okay, cool." And he was like, "Now, this is what I want." So, from a publisher perspective, it's the first time, obviously, I've worked with a publisher because I've basically been doing my own stuff. But he was like, 2 to 4, I want it 1 to 6. I want silo mode. Get rid of the dice. I want cards. And I don't want turns. I want everyone working at the same time, simultaneous rounds. Go away and figure that out. And so I was like, right, okay. So he said yes, and now I've got more work to do. And so it's he has got a mantra, which is let's make a good game awesome. And he's very much in that way. And so he's constantly pushing to actually not only add new bits but also remove bits as well. So yeah. So the main body of it was there, but certain aspects of it changed once Shem got involved. Or I had to figure out certain things. Yeah.
There's a lot to pick apart here. I get a sense that you've got quite a fast-moving brain, and I'm glad I'm taking
Sorry.
No, fine. It's fascinating to me. So rewinding back a little bit, you talked about how you develop the game and add things to it, and it seems to be that learning the history of this era was what added the different components, and that seems to be something that is so regularly lacking in modern board games. Where it's clear that people haven't done the history, and in this game it's so clear that you have, and obviously you said that you have, so there we can draw a line under it. But one thing that's interesting in this is that you're not sort of throwing the history at people. Like it's there, and it's there in the visuals, it's there in the actions, but you're not asking people to read an essay. You're just going to experience this by being in that. Was that a conscious decision? Do you feel like you could have added more flavor text, or are you happy with it being as it is?
I don't think. I suppose it's unconsciously. There's a lot. The effect that Shem has had on the way that I design games. Mm-hmm. Not only this, but other things I've done as well. It's the fact is to remove as much text as possible, and get it down to the icons, because the fact is it's universal. It means that you don't have to explain things. No one wants to come to one of the worst experiences, and there's nothing on the game itself, was Sherlock Holmes, the consultant detective.
Yeah.
And that you get that book where you're reading text out of the book, and I'm like, this feels like work to me. I don't come to a board game feeling that I need to write an essay. I write essays for work. I want to come in and understand it. So I suppose in some respects that I do look to actually remove the text. But to be honest, if you look at roll and writes, most of them aren't text based anyway. They are very symbol based, and I suppose it just naturally led itself into that frame.
What about itself? Because there would be a lot of people coming to this game from, this is going to have a global appeal. and they'll be coming to this. You know, your friends that you first mentioned Hadrian's Wall 2 as a thing, they didn't even know it. So there'll be a lot of people not knowing what Hadrian's Wall is. Obviously, I'm aware of it. I learned it in school because I live and grew up in England, but I wasn't aware of the Picts. So when I was suddenly being attacked by these Picts, I was like, what's Picts? Like, that's not a common word in my vocabulary. So I'm just thinking, in the rule book, did you consider having, here's a brief bit of history about what is going on in this world?
No, and the rule book, except for the forward, was written by Shem. So Shem decided to take that out. I mean, he writes good rule books, and I think it's got the Garfield brand. So I think he just wanted to have that that through line. He's very good at writing rule books as well. I mean, no one likes writing rule books. It's kind of the last thing you think about, really. Like, I suppose you should write a rule book, but I mean, games can live and die in their rule books. I understand that, but he's very good at it. But all I asked, I suppose, is just to write the forward about the servant tokens. I just felt it was we should mention something around those, and also about the history as well, as I did all the reading, and making if you want to know more, it's a UNESCO site. You can go there and find out more information. You can walk it, it's still there. That I think that was important to me, the fact that it's still there, and I'm ashamed to say I haven't walked it, and it's something that when all this COVID thing gets sorted out, that me and my wife are gonna walk it when we get back to England. So
amazing. When you, Bobby Hill, stand on that wall, I'm assuming holding that game,
it'd be rude not to, wouldn't it?
Better explosion in certain board game fans' minds.
There's a gentleman that's actually that, bless him, I've seen him a couple of times on the forums on BGG, and I think he likes the game, but he literally, it sounds like he can open the curtain and it's there. He can see it from his window. So he's like giving like reams of like context to people. I don't even have to do anything. I just like his posts because he's given them all the history. It's great. Yeah.
Going back to the point you made in the introduction, where you talk about the slaves there, the slaves were part of that history, and I think you make a very good point in the introduction there about, we're not going to take them out because it's part of history. It's not nice, it's not pleasant, but it was real, and so we're going to not dishonor those people's suffering by removing them from history. I thought that was really cool. One, that you kept it in, but two, that you just acknowledge that and mention that, because it's a fine line, isn't it, right now in society?
It is a fine line, and I mean, I suppose it was back in 2019 I had that that had the idea, and the world's changed a lot in the last few years, and for everyone to actually just rethink about the kind of things that they want to put out there, including like even like putting that. I mean, if I had my time again, and I may rethink the idea of actually using that completely as well. So but yeah, it's certainly something that I needed. I felt uncomfortable with as it was getting there, and I felt like we needed to call it out. I mean, I've got a friend who's also a Kiwi, Jared, who did Endeavour. So, and that's got a mechanic in it that involves slavery, and they made a point about that when they released the second edition about that, and so it kind of really followed suit to do something similar. So I
think it's important, and I think you've definitely found the right tone with what you've said there, in my opinion. Going back to what you said about when you had that session with Shem and he came back to you and made those changes. One of them I'm interested to pick apart a little bit. I was having a conversation with somebody on Instagram who goes by Mostly Solo, and they are a huge fan of you and this too. I think they're pretty excited about getting their copy soon. And they mentioned the whole 2 to 4 player changing to 1 to 6 thing being quite a big deal for them. And I think it's quite a big deal for a lot of people, for obviously both ends of that scale, being able to play it solo, which I've probably done 75% of my games, and obviously the chance to take it all the way up to 6. What was the thinking there from you when that was said to you? Like, 2 to 4 is a pretty standard player count in games. to rejig the game to work 1 to 6. What was your instant gut reaction when you were asked to do that?
I think the instant gut reaction when someone says you need to change this is always like, oh, I don't want to do it. But then you've got to go, right, let's put some context behind it, and then let's just think about it. I mean, the thing is that I play games. You tend to build the games that you like playing, and so I play games for the social aspect. I've got a lot of mates that play it for solo, and so it never really occurred to me. But obviously, Shem, being a publisher as well as the designer, is always thinking about, well, you know, the biggest audience, and his solo kind of like parts to his games are one of the big selling points, I think. And I know Sam's very good at creating those engines for the West Kingdom series. So it really wasn't. When he said 1 to 6, I was like, right, how do I do this? When it really boils down to it, it's pretty solo anyway. You know, it's not one of the disadvantages or the downfalls of the game is it's very solitaire to a certain extent, because that's the way I built it. I'm not trying. I suppose I was never trying to do it as something else. So it is what it is. So making it a one player is just adding that. Well, okay, how does that single player react with like AI components? And it actually came very, very easily, to be honest. It really, because there was limited interaction between the players, that it was fairly easy. Saying that, there was actually more interaction before that we ended up removing, where what would happen is that there was before there was cards, there was like a rondelle where you'd actually, to get those extra couple of resources, you'd place your general at one of these places around the circle. What would happen is that if you overprotected one of your cohorts and someone underprotected, you could help your neighbor out, and they would not get disdain, and you would get the valor. And I thought that would be really good, because it increased the interactivity between everyone. But it just was underused, and at higher player counts, it just got really confusing. So in the end, I ended up removing it. So I guess, you know, when the game's telling you what it wants to be, you've got to listen to it to a certain extent, and that's what I did. So yeah, so sorry, coming back long way round. The 1 to 6, it really wasn't a huge deal. And to be honest, people are saying now that if you've got enough copies, you could play up to, you know, it's as many as you like, because you're only really dealing with your left and your right.
That's what I would say, because for me, this isn't a 1 to 6. It's more like a welcome to, where it's a 1 to however many. Like, you could play this infinitely, as long as somebody's got, you could play as many people as possible, right? So that was my point. It seemed, I don't know why. I guess you need to put a number there, I suppose, but ultimately the game can be played.
I think cartographer says 1 to 100, doesn't it?
So there's a lot of things on the actual game itself I want to get to quickly, and the first thing is the 2 sheets.
Yes.
And I'm assuming you've got 2 sheets just because there was a lot of stuff and you didn't want one big massive piece of paper. Is it as simple as that?
Yeah, it's as simple as that. It was the fact it was 2 A4s as I was designing it, and one side was always, one piece of paper was always citizens, what I could do with these citizens, and then one side was always the, you know, I suppose the meat and veg of the game, the protecting, the building the wall. So it was always that way. As I said, probably 75% at the beginning was already there, so it was just the way it turned out that way. Again, I suppose in some ways mirroring what Fleet does. So you got the fishing on one page, and then what you do with your catch on the other.
Yeah, makes sense. It's a weird thing where to me it doesn't bother me positively or negatively. It's just essentially a component in the game. But having 2 separate sheets does seem to bother some people. I don't really know why. And what would you say to people who have that issue? Because this is such a fantastic game, but that is something that bothers people.
As I said, people come to games for different reasons. I take solace, I feel comfort in Excel spreadsheets. So when I look at something like that, it doesn't bother me. I mean, the work that Sam's done is fantastic. I think Sam's art style really complements the way that it's presented. It's very clear. It's very, you can very easily see. But I totally understand when people look at that and go, this is not what I want my ball game to be. I want something a little bit more, spacious and spread out, and something a little bit more, I suppose in some ways tactile. I totally understand that. And bless people, because I've been keeping people going, oh my god, this looks really complicated, and people going, once you get into it, it's really easy. To be honest, it's not really up to me. I can evangelize, and I don't mind evangelizing when I'm face to face with someone. But it's almost up to people that have played it, not up to the designer to tell them how good it is, because I'm biased in some ways. So if strangers tell other strangers, well, no, I've tried it, it's not as bad as you think it. So once you get moving, it's fine. Yeah. That's great, and that's what it's pretty straightforward when you get to it.
Yeah. Well, then I'll say it then. It works. It's brilliant. I love the fact you have two sheets, because like you say, you've separated. On the left sheet, you've kind of got your wall building. On your right sheet, you've got your citizen buildings, and it kind of works with. There's a lot of choices and there's a lot going on, and it gives you that chance to sort of separate some decisions. And I physically place the right sheet in a very different part of the world, because obviously they're not next to each other, because then you'd literally have all these people with no wall in them. So
it's almost it kind of sits behind it if you could, but I mean that's difficult to
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it's great and it's fantastic. On the sheets as well, like you say, on first glance, a lot of people are going to come to this and think, whoa, and I was the same. I played relatively complex strategic games a lot, and my first glance to this was whoa. But what I found was, like you said earlier, the rule book is excellent. The layout of this is great. The design of it is fantastic, and because it all just makes sense. That's the key bit. Everything makes sense. There is nothing here where you're like, I don't understand why that would be there, or why that is there, or how that interacts with this. And the symbols all just link up. And it's like this moment as your brain just sort of goes, yeah, oh, okay, I get it. And it's a really satisfying feeling. But like you say, like I say, I get that people on first glance will be intimidated by it. And it feels to me one of those things where you just got to get playing as quickly as possible, and accept that in round one, you maybe, or game one, you might not make the best decisions, but you kind of need that learning experience as you play to get it. And then each piece will come together. And then when it does, it's so beautiful in the way that it's
cool.
Yeah, I now look at this and it makes complete sense. But I remember it was only a week and a half ago when I first played this. I remember looking at this and it just being like what is going
on? Sam McDonald, Shem's other half, he gets infuriated with me, because when he rolls something out in front of me and he starts explaining it, I go, but what's the theme? What's the reason for doing this? I want to understand why. And he's like, doesn't matter. It's just and what I mean. I think I got a mate called Jared who runs 3 Minute Ball Games. I don't know if you've seen that channel. He's another Kiwi. He's a good friend of mine, but he's a very good about the idea of being immersed in the game and it being thematic, and how they kind of are two different things. And I know there's very little I can do about immersion into a roll and write. There's nothing very immersive about rubbing a box, but what I do strive to do is for it to be thematic. And I think if it's thematic, if you understand why you would do that, then that's half the battle, and it helps. I mean, there's a few games I've played where you go, why am I doing this? And it kind of almost breaks. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, that's always something that I've been striving for, especially in this one.
Yeah, definitely. It's just so intuitive and it makes sense. But the joy in it comes for me from two very specific things. One, the choice. I love having choice. Like with a big, exciting worker placement game, there is no fun in that if you just go, well, I'll put it here because that's obviously what I need to do. Whereas here, at the start of the game, you feel like there are so many different routes to where you could go. And having played the game a number of times now, you recognize that going down each of these different routes has a completely different impact on the game. Like most obviously and easy to explain. You can choose to build an early defense of your wall or an early excuse for why everything's fine by just go, okay, I'll just start bribing these people and I'll start getting these. And there's so many cool things that you can do, because you obviously can't ever do everything.
All of it, no.
You've got to make those choices, which again helps, I think, with the game's replayability, because each time you play, you can choose a different route. But the question I want to ask is, because that is purely down to you as the player, obviously you're going to be influenced by the cards that you draw and what objectives you want to try and complete. But largely it's more, I feel, down to choice. How do I feel like playing this game today? Would you agree with that? Is that a conscious decision? You wanted there to be that choice for the player?
It's I want embarrassment of riches. I want that. I mean, if I like a game, I go and find out if there's expansions. I'm not gonna do it. So I want that. I want that ability to be going, well, I don't, the problem with that, it comes with, well, where do I start? And I guess there was two big changes that I made at the end, at the later half of the development. And one was actually shifting down from 10 rounds to 6, which, I mean, thematically made sense because the majority of the war was built in six years, so you can say 6 rounds. And what I ended up doing was shifting a lot of the loss of 4 rounds onto various paths. So you end up getting more, even more and more, kind of backwards and forwards. And the other thing was personal goals, and that was recommended by Shem. That we probably needed something, because if you got into that and you didn't have one of those path cards going, especially on the first play saying go there, or try that out, then you could really lose people. And originally what I ended up having was just like you choose two cards, and that's your path for the whole game. But it was Sam that turned around and said, well, could you divide those down into separate cards? And that made, I think, a massive difference. So because that really does mean that every game is different, because your second card can be completely different on your second game, even if your first card was the same. So yeah, that's been a big drive for it as well.
Those cards are genius. So for people who haven't played this yet, ultimately at the start of each round, you have at the start of the game, you choose your military general, and then at the start of each round, you take 2 cards from it, and you choose one to keep purely for the bit that's on the top. I'll put this on the screen so you can see, which gives you an end game bonus based on something that you can try and achieve throughout the game, which you're talking about there being a way to give the player some direction. And then the other cards you will then keep face up, which gives you some extra resources to you. But also that card that's face up gives trading opportunities for other players in a multiplayer, and they can also take a shape in the scouting part of the board, where essentially you're playing a sort of mini polyomino mini game as well. And the fact that this card essentially has 1, 2, 3, 4 different purposes all on one card, and you choose one card to have one purpose and another card to have 3, one of which benefits you and 2 benefit the other players, and those benefits will potentially either benefit them or absolutely not benefit them based on what they're doing in the game, means that choice from, I think it was pretty much game 4 or 5 when I realized how big that choice was. Previously I was basing it on what I want. What do I want? Do I want the purple on the brick, or do I want the purple and the yellow? That was literally what I was basing my choice on. And then I was thinking, goodness, no, this makes such a difference to everyone else too. And that was a massive moment in me thinking, there's so much layers to this game. It's so clever how everything is done here. And I was speaking to Shem about this the other day, and he said, well, Bobby's an engineer. So I guess you're smart and you've got a brain that thinks on these multi-layers.
No game is built in isolation. No guilt, but and the thing is that if you can be co-designing, you can be working with a publisher, or you could be playtesting, and so you can't take credit for that. You know, you can come with the idea and you can, you know, merge those ideas together. And a lot of the time, it's over a period of. And this was pretty quick for me. I suppose the main body of it was like 9 to 12 months, I guess, but it's still very organic. You play it, you change a bit, it's not working. Someone goes, that's not working, so you change it. And so, yeah. I mean, if you talk to Shem again, he'll tell you how complicated I make my games. I mean, it's a joke. It's crazy. You know, I've got. I mean, I don't know if you can see that, but that's a prototype there. It takes up most of the table. That was supposed to be really quick. It's ridiculous. I make them far too complicated. I think I work in reverse to certainly to Shem. I kind of I tend to end up building everything and then just taking bits off. But I think Shem's said to me that he tends to kind of start small and then just add bits. So I guess it's how it works for you. You find the way that works for you.
What does he know, though? Come on.
It's not. I've said it before. It's not an accident. It's not fluff. It's not luck that he's in the position that he's got 3 games in the top 100. He's very good at what he does. He's the trifecta. He's got designing, publishing, and the actual design as well. Because I mean, I had, you know, he mentions I'm an engineer. So as I said, I love Excel. I can live and breathe it. I'm an analyst now, IT analyst. So I live and breathe Excel. So a lot of it was just like nice boxes everywhere. But well, I mean, between him and his brother Sam, they turn my ugly Excel boxes, publisher boxes into what you see there. So as I said, no game is made in isolation.
Sure. You can definitely see that filtration process though. And I think this game has benefited from being bigger, and then it's almost like it's a fine sauce that you have left on the boil for hours and hours and hours, and it's concentrated, and it's gone from 6 liters down to 50 milliliters, but those 50 milliliters left are so rich in flavor. That's the best way I can describe it. I was talking to a friend about this game the other day, and that was the ridiculous analogy I gave them then, because that to me is what describes this game, because it now, after all of those edits and changes and revisions, is a relatively simple game. You've got a couple of cards, a few components, and 2 pieces of paper and a pencil, but the choices and the complexities in it are amazing. And that leads me to the second thing that I think is so fantastically fun about this game, which is the combos. The combo effect and the powers of doing that are fantastic. And it's so easy to put combos into a game. A lot of games have done it, but so few have done it in a way that makes it so stupidly satisfying as it is here. And the reason why I think you've nailed it so well here is that build throughout the 6 rounds is perfect. First round, every time, no matter, even the fact I've played the game loads now and I know what to expect, every single time the first round I'm thinking, it's so lit, like I'm never going to get there. How am I going to score? I scored so well. I'm never going to score well this time. I've started so slowly. Every time I think that. And then it builds. And then you start to get a few combos in the middle rounds. And then at the end, you get those big, satisfying 3-4 combos. And it feels like such an achievement. It's attainable, it's achievable, but it feels like you've worked to get there. Do you know what I mean?
You want to, as I said, you want to feel smart. You want to go, yes, I've done that, and yeah, and we've managed to do it with that game. It does, yeah. When you can get that, and what I quite like is where you go, okay, and you put your pen down, and then your mate to your left goes, oh, I need that, and then it gives you like a worker, and you go, and then you can start a little mini runner game because they've come out let you set you off again. So it's it's good. It's what I was setting out for, and I've managed to achieve it. So that's good.
And congratulations for that, because it just makes it so fun and so satisfying. And there's just such a subtle tweak to, as you become more familiar with the 2 sheets and the mechanics of how they all interact. Such a subtle tweak to just increase the complexity of each attack. So at the end of each round, you get attacked by the picks, and that can give you points if you defend it successfully, or disdain, as you say, if you're unsuccessful. But that disdain can be countered later on with certain things. But the tweak for the difficulty is you just essentially get attacked by more things. So your defense needs to be better. And that's it, right? Like, it's such a small and easy way to just yourself dial up the complexity as you want to give yourself more of a challenge if you start scoring regularly well all the time. That's so clever. There must have been temptation to change other bits of the game for different complexity levels, but that one small tweak is enough, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I built the game on medium, and then and then we basically just said, right, this is good. Let's ramp it down just for just to make sure that people can get in. And then as I said, if we were scoring. Yeah, I mean Sam McDonald, he's very good at gaming. If you ever get the chance to play with him, he'll quite beat our scores quite easily. So it was like, right, let's stick in a hard mode then. So yeah, yeah, I mean it's there was a lot of like, just an example is that just going back to what I said around working with Shem is that what he will, it's not a question of adding things, he would want to take things away, and he even said, can we do this without roll and write? He actually said that to me, can we do this without roll and write? Go away and build a cube pusher instead, a modular cube pusher. So I was like, and it was almost like, I just want to see if it's better. So I spent I think it was over like a holiday, like a Christmas holiday, and it's beautiful, like, again, spent far too long on a prototype, and then modular. So when you actually, for instance, say you built the like the market, the fact you'd actually bring a small market in, and then you'd have, or if you build the gladiator training gladiator, you'd bring that in, and you'd actually be moving the cubes around on it. And it took a while to build, played once of it, and I was like, this is horrible. One foul swoop and you could knock a cube and you wouldn't know where you were. And the ability to go, right, I'm moving that up on that and then moving that up, and it just became like you were just moving abacuses around the place, and it wasn't fun. So I didn't say anything to Shem. I said, here, you give it a go. About half an hour later, he goes, no, this is horrible. so it was like, okay, yeah, all right, then we'll carry on with what we're doing. So
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you keep referring to the roll and write thing, but it's not a roll and write because you're not rolling anything, right? And it's
flip and fill, I suppose. Yeah,
it's kind of flip and fill in that you've got two cards at the start of the round, but that feels very much like round setup. The game is.
So what would you call it?
Well, that's kind of my question, because I don't think it's either of those, and it doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't.
Oh yeah, no. It's just I'd be interested because people are calling it different things. So it'll be interested to figure out what really to call it.
Yeah, BGG have it listed as paper and pencil, hand management, tech tree. All of those things are accurate, I would say, but doesn't really give it the flavor. When you say this is a worker placement game, this is an engine builder game, the thing with your game is that it's got a lot of that. It feels like there's a bit of work placement, it feels like there's a bit of engine building. There's obviously the core mechanics of a roll and write, flip and write style game there. So I don't know, I feel like you've just created a hybrid of lots of them, and the overall net effect of that is a really fun, satisfying game to play. But yeah,
I'll take it.
Roll and write is interesting, isn't it? It tells people how the game is going to be played and some mechanics of it. And a lot of people are referring to this as Ganshon on steroids, or Ganshon turned to 11. I've heard that a lot.
And across with Paladins as well. So, which is nothing. I mean, Paladins is probably my favorite of the Garfield games. So it's good to be compared to something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're good, and I think they're accurate and fair comparisons. But yeah, this feels different to me. I think Fleet, as you talked about earlier, is a good comparison. But yeah, this does feel quite unique to me in its style of play as well, which I think is fun, because it's obviously it's hard to do that, and filling in one box that allows you to fill in another box that is purely down to your choices, not anything to do with the roll of the dice. The flip of the card at the start of the round obviously gives you slightly different resources to play with, but I feel like you can control that way more than the game controls it, because you can obviously change one person into another person. And going back to the servant thing, obviously a servant could start a servant, but they could become a builder at a later point. They have that, earn that right. And in the game, you can turn any two workers into any one other worker. So I feel like you give the player the control to do that. So Yeah, that's why I don't think it's a flip and right or a roll and right. But yeah, like I say, it really doesn't matter. I just think it's
Yeah.
So yeah, I also wanted to talk about like as we mentioned earlier, the choices you have in the game are so great, and you're never ever gonna do them all. You just literally can't do them all. That word is often overused, but here I think it was fair. Do you think that there is a perfect way to play this game?
Oh, is there a perfect way to play this game? There's a way I like playing the game, but that's because it's the way I play the game. It's the way I play most games. It's a bit of a Leroy Jenkins. I kind of barrel forwards, and but what I've had to do is actually in testing is a bit like, I suppose, running like an AI that Sam's made up. You've got to say, right, I am going to be the kind of person that's going to focus on this to see how that, because you want to make sure that if someone decides to go with this strategy, that the fact is they can still, if they play it correctly, earn similar points to someone if they wanted to do it in another way. So there was that kind of balancing, and Shem was a big part of that testing as well, just to make sure that that there wasn't one that was, and there was a few that were overpowered or underpowered. I know that we played around with the gladiators a bit, because I think at some points they were a bit OP. But I suppose the idea is that you could choose which way you want to go, and you can maybe choose that way because the bonus cards, the path cards, sorry, are actually are taking you in that direction. But it should feel different if we've given you a bumper set of sheets there, and we want to get that that play out of it. So hopefully that there is no one way to play it. Certainly for me, I want to make sure that you can play all different types of ways.
Well, yeah, it definitely feels that way. And I've forced myself, because I've got my own personal favorite now, but I've forced myself to try different things to get a good flavor for it, to see how each thing different works. And my scores average out a similar way. So it definitely does feel balanced. But certain things, like, for example, the theatre, where there are 6 things that you can do there, and you're only allowed to do 1 per round, and there are obviously 6 rounds. That, to me, it feels like I hear you in my ear going, well, you've got to at least do this, because if you don't, you'll miss out.
There is that, yeah. There is that, but I mean, again, we played around with theatres as well. But I mean, you could quite happily ignore those and just focus on something else, and that's fine. And you could go, oh, I'm just going to do the gardens instead. You can go and work on the priest line. Yeah, you could. And the thing is, it's funny you should say that, actually, because Shem's he got hold of me about a month ago and said, because he likes doing those little bonus cards, doesn't he, that you can buy, little promos. He said, can we knock up a promo for Hadrian's Wall? I was like, yeah, I'm sure we can. He's saying, so he's come up with a thing and said, what happens if we add one more path card, and then what happens is they pull 3 around and they play one, and then put one down as as their bonus card, and the other one goes back on top, so they're going to see it again next round. So it kind of changes it a bit around, and that 13th card will be the performers. So I think it's called the actor. So you'll gain victory points based on a number of performances that you can do throughout the game. So if you get it at the start, you've got a good way of scoring 3 easy points. But you're right. Yeah, I mean, a performer is one of my favorites, but it's not necessarily, you don't have to go that way.
I don't believe you. Interestingly, on the training grounds, where you have the chance to turn one of your blues into a black, essentially, you can do that 5 times, once per round. And so that, to me, is suggesting this is a highly powerful thing. So we're not going to let you do it more than once per round, but we're also not going to sort of force you into doing it every time, because you can't do it every time anyway. At max, do 5 out of 6. And it felt to me like there was a conscious decision for that. But with the theatre, you could have done that. Like, you could have had, there are 5 maximum performances over 6 rounds, 1 per round. But no, you've got 6. And also the benefits there are all pretty good. And the cost to open the theatre is pretty
reasonable.
Yeah. So I always feel like I need to open that theatre in round one because I need to give myself that choice, and I like.
I tell you what, this is another. I'm probably pulling back the curtain, but I do like the theatre. Sometimes you can get stuck at the end of a round with certain amount, or if you've gone a bit too heavy on, say, getting too many producing too many resources, you get stuck with resources you cannot spend. So if you open the market and you open the theatre, it means that at the end of that round, you've got some way of getting rid of those resources and earning a bit more cash. So it's that it's, as I said, that's a way of if that's a way of using them. So
sounds like you've got a lot of potentials for what could be next. Do you have any idea what you want the next project to be?
Yeah, so I don't know how much to say. I could probably have a chat to you afterwards about it. But yeah, there's it's funny enough. It's that you come from mechanic or you come from theme, and as going back to me being an old dad now is going, oh, that bit of history really fascinates me. I'm sure we can find a game in that. And so I've had a tendency to actually fall on some history books, and there's a particular part of history just after the Second World War in England that fascinates me, that I'm looking at the moment, and that's what that one's looking behind me. So it's early stages, but it's finding the fun, just seeing whether or not it works, and it's finding the fun. That's what it's all about, finding the fun. Yeah.
You know how Welcome To has now got, it seems, 10 different variations of essentially the same game. They found a cool formula and then just made a Las Vegas one. They made a Halloween one. It feels to me you've got something very similar here with Hadrian's Wall, where you could take this core mechanic and put it in different eras of history. You could do a space one, you could do a war.
It has crossed my mind. Yeah, it's funny that, because on the train I'm actually reading some bits about Anglo-Saxon, because that's a period of time. You see, there's a lot of there's a lot of games around Vikings, funnily enough, but that's that's 800s, but between the time that the Romans left England in around the start of the 400s to 800s, there's a whole gap there. What went on there? Can there be a game about what went on there? So it's so I am doing a bit of reading about that as well. Certainly, I don't know if. I think sometimes I don't know if I'm good at forcing a game into a mechanic or a mechanic into a game. Something will come hopefully organically, but we'll see where it leads. See where it leads.
Awesome. Well, I hope you do, because I'm hoping in a few years' time I've got a ton of different variations of this game on my shelf, because it's so fun. It's so unique. It scratches. I love this sort of style of game. The point of when I played Ganz Schon, I was like, this is the best roll and write, best in its class. It's so good. Nothing's ever going to beat this. Then I played Divi Dice and realized that was better, and again said nothing's ever going to beat this. Now I've played Hadrian's Wall, and I've realized that no, this for me now is best in class. I like Fleet, but for me it's just a little bit too much. Whereas this is the perfect amount. If I want to set
what
up
do you think of cartographers?
I like cartographers, but it didn't blow me away in the way that it has done seemingly the rest of the gaming community. I think the solo mode is quite limited and not fun. You don't get enough done. It's fun, and I will play. If anyone says, do you want to play, I will happily play and I'll enjoy it. But it's a 7 out of 10 game for me. Whereas this is a 9 pushing a 10. It's just got that extra area of class where it feels instinctively better. And for creating something that delivers like that in such, as I mentioned earlier, with such limited stuff, I just think it's fantastic. Because what is great here is not like you kind of talked earlier about not liking dudes on the map. This game isn't great because there's loads of cool minis. This game isn't great because there's loads of stuff being thrown at you. This is great. This game is great because of fantastic choices and clearly brilliantly engineered mechanics that just fit together so perfectly. And I wanted to say that to your virtual face.
Thank you.
And congratulate you and applaud you for it, because it is fantastic. And there's very few games that I get that I think I'm going to play that over and over and over and over for the rest of my gaming time. And this is 100% one of them. So obviously what you absolutely need to do is, as quickly as possible, have refill sheets available, because I'm not interested in laminating. I want to, all the ones I've played, I've dated and put on the, the back, I don't want to laminate. So you need refill sheets at some point. I know there's like a phone book's worth of stuff in here.
I'll have a word with Shem. I'm sure we'll sort something out. Yeah.
But no, seriously, congratulations. It's a phenomenal play. It's been awesome talking with you, and thank you for making this brilliant game. It's just fantastic, and I can't wait to see what you come up with next.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.